People always say tomatoes are something anybody can grow. So why is your plant big and green, but still not giving you any fruit? Sometimes the problem isn't that you're lazy with it. Honestly, a lot of people mess up their tomatoes because they're trying too hard, just in the wrong way. They prune wrong, fertilize wrong, water wrong, or keep adding too much around the base before they even know what the plant actually needs. Especially mistake number 3. This one looks like you're doing something really kind for the plant, but it can kill the plant fast when it's getting close to the finish line in June. Tomatoes were the first crop I ever really learned to master in my yearly vegetable garden. In today's video, I'm going to share all the lessons I've learned over the years so you can grow tomato plants that are stronger, more productive, and less likely to run into trouble in June. We're also going to clear up a lot of tomato growing myths in this video. There's just too much bad advice out there about growing tomatoes. I don't want you making the same common mistakes that so many gardeners have already made. Mistake 1. Pruning the wrong type of tomato. I grew up in a family that grew plenty of tomatoes every year. Not every year had good weather. Some years were blazing hot, some years had too much rain, and some years pests and disease showed up early. But in my family, tomato season was never treated like it was all just luck. Neighbors would sometimes say, if the weather is kind to us this year, we'll have tomatoes. If it's a bad year, we lose the crop. And that's partly true. Weather definitely matters. But my grandfather always said, a lot of tomato plants don't fail because of bad luck. They fail because the grower misses the small signs in June. And the first mistake comes from pruning the wrong kind of plant. When I first learned how to grow tomatoes, the first lesson my grandfather taught me wasn't what fertilizer to use or how much water to give. He pointed at 2 tomato plants side by side and asked me, "Do you know if these 2 plants are going to fruit the same way?" Back then I thought it was simple. A tomato is a tomato. But that was the first real mistake that can make all the care you put in later go to waste. If nobody has told you this before, then you need to know it now. Tomatoes come in 2 types, determinate and indeterminate. The quickest way to tell is to look at the plant tag. If the tag says determinate, that's a determinate tomato. If it says indeterminate, that's an indeterminate tomato. If you lost the tag, watch how the plant grows. Determinate tomatoes are usually shorter, grow more like a bush, and set fruit pretty heavily during one period. Indeterminate tomatoes usually keep stretching taller, and as they grow, they keep putting out more leaves, more shoots, and more flower clusters. The problem is a lot of people buy the plant, put it in the ground, and then lose the label. After that, they watch one video that says, pinch off the suckers, and they do it to every plant. With a plant that should be pruned, that's fine. But with a plant that should not be pruned hard, you may be cutting off the very branches that were going to carry fruit. With determinate tomatoes, don't go pinching off suckers all over the plant. Just remove leaves that touch the ground, diseased leaves, and a few leaves that are too low so the base can breathe better. The more important thing is to support the plant well, because this type often carries a lot of fruit at the same time. With indeterminate tomatoes, you can choose 1 or 2 main stems, then pinch off some of the small suckers so the plant doesn't get too crowded. But don't cut off flower clusters, and don't strip the plant so bare that the fruit sits in direct sun. So before you cut off any more shoots, ask yourself, do you know whether the tomato plant you're growing is determinate or indeterminate? If you're not sure, don't prune hard. Do the safe part. First, remove leaves touching the ground. Remove diseased leaves. Keep the flower clusters and watch the plant for a few more days. And if the plant still isn't giving you fruit the way you hoped, don't rush to push it harder. Because a lot of people right at that step make the second mistake. Mistake 2. Giving it too much nitrogen. June is almost the finish line for tomatoes. The plant is tall, the leaves are full, but there still aren't many flowers, and there isn't much fruit yet. That's when a very common reaction kicks in. Add more fertilizer, so the plant gets stronger and fruits faster. But trust me, that might be the biggest mistake you've made. The problem is the kind of fertilizer you're using. If you keep using a fertilizer that's too high in nitrogen, or one made for seedlings and leafy growth, the plant can head in the wrong direction. Nitrogen helps the plant grow stems and leaves. That's good early on. But once the plant is moving into flowering and fruiting, too much nitrogen can make it greener and bushier, while the flowers and fruit don't increase the way you want. My grandfather never looked at a lush green tomato plant and decided right away that it was doing great. He always looked deeper. How many flowers are those flowers setting fruit? Is the canopy too thick? He said it very simply. Leaves feed the plant, but we grow tomatoes for the fruit. You can spot this mistake pretty easily. The plant is dark green, grows tall, fast, has lots of new shoots, thick stems and heavy leaves, but not many flowers. Or it has flowers, but very little fruit. From a distance, the plant looks healthy. But when you actually look for tomatoes, there's not much there. But even if you've already made this mistake, you don't need to pull the plant out and start over. Just check the fertilizer label again. If the first number on the label is too high, don't keep using it while the plant is flowering. If the plant is already too green and leafy, back off the nitrogen feeding for a while. Choose a fertilizer that fits the flower and fruit stage better. And don't fertilize just because you think the plant is not moving fast enough. And when the plant is already too leafy, another June habit can make the problem worse very quickly, especially if you usually water after dinner. Mistake 3. Watering the leaves in the evening. Here it is. This is mistake number 3, the one I really want you to pay attention to. If you only remember one thing from this part, remember this? Don't let tomato leaves stay wet overnight. Of course, I understand why a lot of people water at that time. Maybe you get home from work late, eat dinner, and only then go out to the garden. The tomato plant looks a little droopy after a hot day. You grab the hose and spray from the top down to cool it off. Or maybe you simply heard somewhere that evening, watering is better. But if you do that again and again, you're basically setting leaf disease up to start. Leaf disease doesn't need anything complicated. It only needs 3 things: leaves that stay wet too long, still air, and disease from the soil splashing up. During the day, if the leaves get wet, the sun and wind can help dry them faster. But evening is different. Leaves dry much more slowly. If the plant is crowded, the inside leaves stay wet even longer. When you spray hard from above, soil can splash up onto the lower leaves too. And that's often where the trouble starts. Check the lower part of the plant. Don't just look at the top that still looks green. If the lower leaves start getting brown spots, yellow around the spots, and then slowly dry from the bottom up, that's not something to ignore. Diseases like early blight or septoria leaf spot often start low on the plant and slowly move upward. In my family, my grandfather had a rule that was very easy to remember. If you need to water, water the soil. If you can choose the time, choose the morning. The goal is to give the roots water without leaving the leaves wet all night. I think this is the most serious mistake tomato growers make, but thankfully it's also the easiest one to fix. You only need to remember a few things, and once you hear them, you won't need to write them down. Water at the base, don't spray the whole plant. Use a gentle hose, a watering can, a drip line, or any method that puts water into the soil around the roots. Mulch around the base with straw, clean, dry leaves, clean, dry grass, or organic mulch to keep soil from splashing onto the leaves. Remove leaves that touch the ground, diseased leaves, and keep the base open so air can move through. If you already see badly diseased leaves, cut them off and throw them in the trash. Don't leave them around the base. If you're cutting several plants, wipe your pruners before moving to the next plant. Remember this water. The base water early, keep the leaves dry overnight. And when the plant already has leaf spots or starts slowing down, don't rush to pour on some strong recipe to save it, because that's when a lot of people make the 4th mistake. Mistake 4. Overdoing homemade mixtures. When a tomato plant starts looking rough, a lot of people panic. The leaves have spots, flowers drop, there isn't much fruit, and the plant slows down. Instead of stopping to figure out the cause, they do the easier thing: they go online and look for some strong recipe to pour around the base. I'm not saying this because I'm against homemade recipes completely. Actually, in my own garden, we've tried plenty of simple mixtures to support plants. In a little bit, I'll mention one recipe that many people like to use for tomatoes. But before we talk about the recipe, you need to understand one thing: homemade mixtures only help when they're used at the right time, in the right amount, and for the right reason. In my family, my grandmother never saw a plant turn a little yellow and immediately poured something around the base. She checked the soil first. Is the soil dry, or is it staying too wet? Are the sick leaves starting from the bottom or from the top? Is the plant too crowded? Is there airflow around the base? She always watched first, then stepped in. If the plant doesn't have steady water, has leaf disease, has roots sitting in too much water, or is too crowded, a homemade mixture won't fix the real problem. Using too much can also throw the soil out of balance, attract ants or other insects if there's something sweet in it, and make it harder for you to know what actually helped the plant and what made it worse. If you're trying a new recipe every week, mixing too many things at once, raising the amount, because you think more is better, or you can't remember what you poured around the plant last time, that's a sign you're doing too much. The right way is to stop and check first. If you want to try something, try only one thing at a time, use a light amount tested on a few plants first, and write down the day you used it. Don't spray it on the leaves in the evening, especially after mistake number 3. Before you pour on any more mixture, ask yourself, do I actually know what this plant needs? And a lot of the time, what tomato plants need most in June is not a new recipe. They need something much simpler. But growers keep getting it wrong. Mistake 5, inconsistent watering. Can you believe it? It sounds so simple, but beginners are not the only ones who make this mistake. Busy people make it too. They forget to water today, then tomorrow they see the plant drooping and water a lot to make up for it. Some people water right after a rain without checking the soil because they think no rain is ever enough. My grandfather didn't water tomatoes just because the surface of the soil looked dry. He stuck his finger down into the soil to see if it was still moist underneath. He also didn't water a ton just to make up for a few days of forgetting. To him, the important thing wasn't watering as much as possible. It was keeping the soil evenly moist. Look for these signs: leaves drooping badly in the hot afternoon, cracked dry soil, fruit cracking after rain, lots of flowers dropping, or a potted tomato drying out the day after you just watered it. If you see the soil going from pale and bone dry to soaking wet, your watering routine needs some adjusting. The right way is to check the soil before you water. Don't just look at the surface. Check a few centimeters below. Water deeply so the water reaches the root zone, but don't overdo it to make up for several days of forgetting. Mulch around the base with straw, clean dry leaves, clean dry grass, or organic mulch, so the soil holds moisture more evenly. With potted plants, check more often because pots heat up and dry out fast. Do you usually water when the soil actually needs water? Or do you water when you suddenly remember 3 next-level secrets from good tomato growers? If you fix the 5 mistakes we just talked about, your tomato plants already have a much better foundation. But good tomato growers don't just avoid mistakes. They also know how to read the plant and do a few things at the right time. I learned these things from my grandparents, my parents, and a few neighbors who were really good at growing tomatoes. Everyone had their own way of caring for them, but after many years, I noticed they all had a few habits in common. The first secret is managing the fruit load. A plant having tons of tiny tomatoes is not always a good thing. If the plant is still weak, or if one cluster is too crowded, the plant may not be able to support all of them. My mother would often remove the small tomatoes that were misshapen, damaged by pests, or packed too tightly in one cluster. When I was little, I thought that was a waste, but later I understood. Sometimes removing a few bad fruits helps the remaining ones grow bigger and keeps the plant from wearing itself out. You don't need to thin fruit all over the plant. Just look and see if the plant is carrying more than it can handle. The second secret is checking the soil and water before stepping in. Yellow leaves don't always mean the plant needs fertilizer. Blossom end rot doesn't always mean the soil is low in calcium. A slow-growing plant doesn't always need another new fertilizer. My father didn't like guessing. Before adding anything, he checked whether the soil was dry or wet, what he had fertilized with last time, whether the plant was getting enough sun, and where the problem started. If the same problem comes back year after year, think about testing the soil or the pH of your water. Before you add anything to the soil, know what the soil is like. The third secret is putting up stakes or supports before the plant falls over. A lot of people wait until the plant is leaning, branches are snapping, and fruit is touching the ground before they start looking for stakes. By then, it's usually too late. My grandfather liked to stake plants while they were still standing straight. When a plant hasn't fallen yet, tying it up is easy. Once it has fallen, lifting it back up often breaks more branches. Use a sturdy stake cage or trellis. Tie with soft ties and check the ties every week because the stems will keep growing. When you know how to lighten the load on the plant, check the soil and water, and keep the plant standing strong, then the plant is more ready for other kinds of support. Next, I'll talk about one homemade mixture you can use for tomatoes, but it has to be used the right way, not just poured on randomly while you wait for a miracle. The homemade mixture I've tried for tomatoes. Back in mistake number 4, I said I'm not against homemade mixtures. I just don't like people pouring things around the base when they don't know what the plant actually needs. Now I'm going to talk about one recipe I've used for tomatoes, made with dry yeast molasses, or sugar buttermilk and a little baking soda. But the important part isn't just the recipe. The important part is when you use it, how much you use, and how the plant responds. At first, I used to think adding some kind of mixture around the base would make the plant bounce back quickly. But when I used it while the plant was waterlogged, had leaf disease, didn't get enough sun, or the soil was already too wet, it almost never helped. Sometimes it even made it harder for me to figure out where the real problem was. Later on, I only used it when the plant already had a better foundation, steady watering an open base, with good airflow soil that wasn't soaked, and the plant was entering the stage where it needed to support flowers and fruit. Used that way, I didn't see the plant change overnight. But after a few days to about 1 week, the plants that were already healthy usually held their leaf color better, put out new growth more evenly, and drooped less at the end of a hot day. Flowers and young fruit also held better, especially when watering had already been done right. My mother used to say that anything you bring into the garden is like adding salt to a pot of food. A little at the right time can help. Too much ruins it. The recipe I use is 1 gallon of lightly warm water, 1 tablespoon of dry yeast, 2 tablespoons of molasses or sugar, 1 cup of buttermilk, and 1 tablespoon of baking soda. First, add the yeast to a little lightly warm water. Add the molasses or sugar, then let it sit for a bit until it gets a light foam. After that, add the rest of the water, add the buttermilk, then add the baking soda last, and stir well. The water should be lightly warm, not hot. I see this as a support mixture for the soil around the roots, not a complete fertilizer. Yeast and something sweet may support microbial activity in the soil. Buttermilk adds a little organic matter. Baking soda is used only in a small amount. Don't increase the dose. When you use it, don't pour it on the leaves. Pour it around the root zone, not right against the stem. For a small plant, use about 1/4 cup. For a medium plant, use about 1/2 cup. For a large, healthy plant in the ground, you can use about 1 cup. The soil should be slightly moist first. Don't pour it onto bone-dry soil. But there's one more thing. Not every garden is the same. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a few notes so you can apply these tips to your own garden the right way. Adjusting to your own garden. Now, before you apply everything I just said, look at your actual garden, not my garden, not the garden in another video, but the place where you're growing your tomatoes. Is your plant in blazing sun? Do the leaves droop in the afternoon? Is the fruit getting sun-scald, turning white or yellow on the side facing the sun? If so, don't rush to prune off more leaves. The plant still needs enough leaves to protect the fruit. Check water more often, keep mulch around the base, and if the sun is too strong, you can use light shade cloth in the afternoon. Does your area get frequent afternoon rain? Are the leaves still wet in the morning? Do the lower leaves already have brown or yellow spots? If so, the most important thing is to keep the base open and airy. Remove leaves touching the ground, mulch the base so soil doesn't splash up onto the leaves, and don't wet the leaves when you water in the evening. Are you growing in pots or in the ground? If you're growing in pots, how many gallons is the pot? Does it have good drainage holes? Did you water yesterday and the soil is already dry today? Tomatoes in pots change very fast, so don't pour in too much fertilizer or homemade mixture all at once. Check the soil more often. If you're growing in the ground, pay attention to the planting spot. Does that spot stay soggy after rain? Does the plant get the same leaf disease every year? If so, the issue may be the soil drainage or disease spores left around that area. Comment using this format what state or region you're in, whether you're growing in pots or in the ground, about how many hours of sun the plant gets each day, and what the biggest problem is right now. For example, I'm in Georgia, growing in a 10-gallon pot, about 7 hours of sun, and the lower leaves are getting spots. With just a few lines like that, it's much easier to guess what the plant needs. And tomato growers in areas like yours can also share their real experience. I've grown tomatoes long enough to know one thing: a lot of the time plants don't fail because we don't know a good tip. They fail because we keep repeating one small mistake without realizing it. I used to be the same way. One season I fertilized more when the plant didn't need it. One season I watered at the wrong time. One season I tried too many things at once and didn't know what was actually helping the plant. Later, I understood that before looking for a new trick, the first thing is to stop the mistake that's weakening the plant. So after this video, look at your tomato plant and ask yourself, which of the 5 mistakes are you making? Pruning wrong, using too much nitrogen, wetting the leaves in the evening, using homemade mixtures randomly, or watering inconsistently? If you have a tip that helped your tomatoes grow stronger, share it below. I always like reading real experience from real gardens. And if you want to keep learning simple ways to protect your home from insects, grow healthier tomatoes, and keep your garden stronger through each season, subscribe to the channel. The upcoming videos will keep going in that direction.